All right, welcome. My name is Cajetan, Iheka, and I am director of the Whitney Humanities Center. We are delighted to have all of you here this evening for our Franke Fellow lecture by Samira Negrouche, who has been a wonderful force, in this building this semester, from being a lively presence in our weekly fellows lunches to stimulating our minds with the poems that she posts on our door in the doorway, to visiting classes and having dinners with our students. She has brought so much vibrancy, to this building at our university. So I'm glad that we all made the time to gather to listen to us share our work this evening. So as we begin, I want to express our gratitude to the Franke family who've made this possible with their generous gifts, to the Whitney Humanities Center. So the Franke Fellowship, for those who are not aware, brings a distinguished writer, artist, translator to spend a semester here developing work. And over the years, we've been lucky to work on a fantastic list of writers, including Jennifer McColby, who was here last year, Sheila Etty, Hilton House, and in the spring we will have the New Yorker writer, Julian Lucas. So we're really delighted to include Samira among this distinguished list, and we look forward to what she'll be sharing with us this evening. Samira will be introduced this evening by my colleague and friend, Jarvis. Professor Jarvis is professor in the French department. She's a scholar of the aesthetics of North Africa. She's author of an award-winning book, Decolonizing Memory, Algeria and the Politics of Memory, that came out in 2021 from Duke University Press. And then she's finalizing and publishing next year, University of Chicago Press, a new book, The Desert is Alive. So we're delighted to have Jill be host of Samira this semester, but also to introduce her. Please join me in welcoming Jill to the podium.
Thank you, Cajetan, and the Whitney for making this possible to bring a friend, collaborator, co-thinker, Samira Negrouche, to us. I'll introduce her and then give her the time, because I know you came to listen to her, not me. Samira Negrouche lives in Algiers, and she writes poems that cross borders. She speaks 3 native languages, all of them Algerian, the Tamazight language Kabyle, Arabic, and French, in which she writes her poetry. But today she will speak to us in English, in which she has become quite fluent since she got here just a few months ago. She lives and works in an apartment above Rue de Douche Mourad in Algiers, and often travels to her home village, Tawarit, in Kabylie, which is southeast of the city. There are ancestral olive trees there, trees that have fertilized Negrouche's lexicon. She writes, "Come from a millennial mountain village. Even though I was born in Algiers, I can permit myself to be a deep-rooted olive tree, so deep-rooted that my branches don't fear reaching out to the farthest regions." Like those fearless branches, Negrouche's oeuvre reflects a precisely located yet capacious sense of Algeria's geographical, linguistic, and historical terrains. She walks often, including here in New Haven, where she has been known to walk all the way from HQ to Hamden, where she's staying. She is attentive to the details of sound and space. She picks up accents, languages, and rhythms easily. I've been listening to her talk of conversations with bus drivers and shopkeepers as she explores the city in which she now finds herself. And the unmistakable syntax of Algiers, the scansions of Tawarit, run through her poetry, as do the rhythms of the many other places where she has lived, traveled, worked, and walked, including perhaps New Haven someday. In Kipa, which has been translated by Marilyn Hacker as "Who is Speaking?", the poet addresses an interlocutor who has posed the usual question about whether an Algerian can write authentic poetry in French. She counters, "My language is a constellation of poets, each one bringing his or her own meter. I dig down into the poem thinking of these subterranean musics. Silence is a landscape, and my ancestors know no borders." I met Samira about a decade ago in Algiers and have since then been reading her writing and listening to her insights as ways to sound out some of the subterranean musics that both distinguish her style and also place her writing within a distinctively Algerian intellectual and aesthetic history that is also worldly. Since 2001, Negrouche has published, I think, 11 collections of poetry in French, many of them with the innovative publishing houses that renewed Algeria's cultural sphere in the wake of the devastating 1990s war against civilians. To protect and cultivate a plurilingual Algerian literary history that was at risk of being disappeared, Negrouche has also edited both an anthology of works by contemporary Algerian poets who write in French and an anthology of works by international poets translated into Tamazight, Arabic, and French. She's also undertaken, and I think today you may see some reflection of this, undertaken genre-mending collaborations with other poets, with visual artists, musicians, and performers, a practice that I think she considers an act of translation. These installations, performances, and collaborations help to elucidate a perspective that recognizes Algerian and Maghrebi literature in French as Maghrebi and Algerian, a perspective that is attuned to Algeria's long history as a center of aesthetic and theoretical creation in multiple languages. Negrouche's poetry and her other writing continues to sound out the subterranean musics of a contemporary Algerian aesthetic landscape that includes but is not contained by French, her own primary poetic language. So I'll close and send this over to Samira by quoting her poem, Qui parle, or Who is Speaking. There, the poet, again, ignores the interlocutor's questions about French in order to pose a different question that I suspect will also animate her speaking to us today. Then who speaks for the ancestors, she asks. Today, that's the only question that matters to me. Welcome, Samira Negrouche.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to see you. Not only I recognize some of my friends from the Whitney Fellows, but also my neighbors, some students I have met, some people from the Middle East department, whom I was very lucky to meet 2 weeks ago with Omni Al-Shukri. I really feel very, very happy and extremely grateful to be here to spend these few months with you. Grateful to the Whitney Humanities Center, to the Franke family. This experience is something that will last with me for a long time to come. And yeah, thank you for your welcome. I'm happy to share with you moments of life, of thinking, of wondering in these times that are sad sometimes, difficult some other times, but who are also offering us the possibility to build something that we can maybe design all together. So this talk will be in 3 parts. The longer one is the lecture. It's called The Archeology of Becoming. And then I will show you a short video and I will read something new I wrote in echoing this video. And after the Q&A, I will give a short reading for those who came for poetry reading. So, okay, we can start. Paris has the origin of the world, L'origine du monde by Gustave Courbet. We have Nejma, a meteor, a geyser that doesn't fit in a national library in a single city or in a period of time. 3 years ago, I spent the winter in Paris, living by the Seine at La Cité Internationale des Arts, among an incredibly diverse group of artists from all over the world. I would daily walk by the river, absorb its beauty, its light, its serenity, the infinite horizon perfectly drawn by its successive bridges. I would daily walk, meet lovers and addicts, hope and despair, with the feeling that a ray of sun could suddenly turn into an act of folly or anger and that somebody would end up in the water. Still, the edge remained attractive and I kept exploring the surroundings, sometimes ending up at Musée de l'Orangerie, where Monet's nymphéas would help me calm down from the feeling of disruptive times and memories. Just across the Cité Internationale des Arts, I once noticed the quay was called Quai aux Fleurs, Quay of the Flowers, in reference to a flower market that has since been moved to a nearby place. I immediately thought of Malek Haddad's novel Le quai aux fleurs ne répond plus. The flower quay doesn't respond anymore, a book published in 1961. All Haddad's literary works have been written and published during the War of Liberation, 1954-1962, all published in Paris between 56 and 61. A son of the city of Constantine in the east of Algeria, he moved to France in 1954, the year the war started, probably a few weeks before. He then decided to interrupt his studies at the Faculty of Law of Aix-en-Provence, living from diverse precarious jobs, activating with the liberation movement, and writing. He had to leave France around 1961, moving to Tunis, then quickly after that to Constantine at the independence of the country in 62. In his fourth and last novel, the main character, Khaled, is a writer from Constantine who visits his friend Simon in Paris, now married to Monique. Monique enjoys spending time with Khaled. She's fascinated by him, and the attraction will soon follow. An impossible love that reminds us of another impossible love in the unfinished novel of Mouloud Feraoun, L'anniversaire, the birthday. Khaled walks by the quay. Everything is silent and cold. His feeling of solitude is immense. He recalls memories from another river, mostly dried, the Rumel. His memories with Simon, a friend he grew up with in Constantine, who became now a successful lawyer, sacrificing his past ideals in the process. Ideals he shared with Khaled. Khaled remembers Urida. Urida means little rose, the young and beautiful wife who stayed home and who doesn't answer his letters anymore. She eventually fell in love with a French soldier. Khaled expects a sign that won't come. He feels betrayed in all ways. He reflects on a separation, on a double impossible dialogue, on an internal exile, a multi-layered exile, a monologue that translates as an implosion in the language. The impossibility to reconcile parts of the self, to find a common language with home, with what was once home. This novel is the annunciation of an identity of exile that will only grow and deepen after the independence. The quay may refer here to a train station, but it is also a mirror image, the Seine, the scene, and the Rumel. Monique, also the name of Saint Augustine's mother, whose name returns in other Algerian novels, Monique and Urida. The rose in her mountain, a desired wife, a desired country that slowly vanishes. A separation that only silence can carry. The writer will keep silent after this novel. Quai aux fleurs. When Malek Haddad lived in Paris and wrote his first and last novel, was the home to Président René Coty, President of France between 54 and early 59. Some of the most violent years during the Algerian War of Liberation, what was then called les événements d'Alger, the events of Algiers in 58, resulted in a political crisis which led to the Fifth Republic, then to the election of Le Général Charles de Gaulle as the new president. De Gaulle, who visited Algiers as Coty's prime minister in June 58 and who pronounced the famous sentence, Je vous ai compris, I got you, I understand. Did he really understand, and who did he understand? Quai aux fleurs, René Coty and France didn't answer. René Coty died in 1962, shortly after the independence of Algeria. Quai aux fleurs was those years also a home to philosopher Vladimir Yankelevich, who clearly and strongly supported the Algerian independence. Quai aux fleurs, France, and its philosophers, partly understood, partly answered, too late. The quay remained silent, cold, beautiful, furiously beautiful. Malink and others has gone, torn up in language and silence. But the river is loud, and its long and silent nights as long as Munch's silent scream. Munch's silent scream was then visible with its different sketches by the scene at the Musée d'Orsay. I left the exhibition carrying with me Munch and Yankelevich by the loud scene, inhabited by bridges and bodies, screams and slogans I can only remember. I do remember, and I find signs I didn't come for. living for the living who can only live if we listen to the noise, to the loud, to the unspeakable, to the entangled past. Back to my international community of artists, where everybody tries to find new ways of making art as essential, as urgent, as brave, and just as possible. After COVID, after Ukraine's war, after the heartbreaking images from Afghanistan and other heartbreaking images, after an accelerating rise of tensions and global despair, we were all open to science and to new routes. While visiting an artist studio on one of our weekly Wednesdays open studios, we already have our Wednesdays there, I met Lars Åkerlund, a Swedish composer who literally jumped towards me as if I was an awaited vision, the confirmation of why he came back to Paris. On a past recent short visit at La Cité Internationale des Arts, he found a book left by the previous artist. Although the studio belonged to Sweden, he didn't know if the other artist was Swedish, as sometimes these studios are occupied by artists whose countries don't own a studio at La Cité. I was myself living in an Australian studio. My close neighbors were from Germany and Netherlands. Lars found a book. He didn't know if the previous artist forgot it or left it on purpose, as an invitation to the next occupier of the place. The studio was in the third floor and had a beautiful view to the sea, what I didn't have. Mine looked at the interior courtyard, the patio, exactly as if I was in a house of the Casbah or in Mohammed's Deeb, La Grande Maison, the big house. We were in a big house, and we had a common central agora. Lars visited me in my big little house. He told me about the book, about the Algerians drowned in the sea in 1961, the same year Malek Haddad published his cave that wouldn't answer, the cave that wouldn't care of Khaled, of Malek, and others. October 17, 1961, the French National Police attacked the pacific Algerian protest for the independence of the country with an unprecedented violence, murdering and injuring hundreds of Algerians. Some of them thrown into the sea, dead or still alive, some bodies still missing. Lars wanted to walk by the water. He told me how he couldn't compose music, ignoring that he was daily looking at that river. He had to come back and to do something about it. He applied for a one-year residency. At that point, he still didn't know if he would, could, and how he would translate the massacre and his encounter with the book, with a history he wasn't familiar with. I listened to Lars. We stopped by the Léopold Sédar Senghor Bridge. We could feel the bridge vibrating underneath. It sent me back to the suspended bridge of Constantine, back and forth, layers of images and vibrations. Lars didn't know if he wanted me to write something. I didn't have time to write something. I didn't come for the past, or at least I wanted to be the one who decides for the story, its signs, and its perspectives. Lars didn't really need my writing. Words would have corrupted his process. Algerian history deserved to live outside of us, to cross borders and imaginations. His accidental encounters were much more powerful than any collaboration he could have with an Algerian author at that stage. Our conversations weren't just enough, were just the tiny needed step. Lars listened to the river. He designed sounds consciously aware of the memory of its waters. He then met Celine Struger, an Austrian artist who was boringly sculpting faces in fountains. Faces, water, and sound met. They shared their electric chamber choir at La Cité in November 23. I don't know if they told the audience the story of the book and what happened a certain night of October 61. I believe they did. Looking at the video of these sculpted faces in vibrating waters and sounds makes me think that Iheka has definitely answered and won't stop answering while questions still remain, unfold, reshape. July 2024, Paris Olympics, parade of boats. The Algerian delegation appears throwing red roses in the water. Urida has answered. Little Rose answered for the other little roses. Urida Meden, 16 years old, in the Casbah of Algiers, August 57, murdered by torture. The scene as a wound has reopened in the midst of an unprecedented diplomatic crisis between Algeria and France. I didn't ignore the past, but didn't come for the past, and certainly didn't come to write about the past from Paris. I belong to another city, another experience, another perspective, but Paris had other projects for me. My departure was approaching when I met Rashid. The sidewalk was crowded on a sunny old day. I was walking very quickly by the long line of booksellers, not really focused on the covers, as I wanted to distance from the crowd when I suddenly sensed that I just missed something. I had to come back a few meters behind, and here was the cover of Les Récifs du Silence, The Reefs of Silence, a poetry collection by Ahmed Asghar, published in 1974. A very rare book he didn't have himself in his late life. It was the only Algerian book in the midst of what we usually find there, some French and international classics, art books, and other attractions for tourists. I was shocked, moved, and excited. I looked for the bookseller. I understood from his very discreet but specific accent he was a Kabyle speaking, so I told him in Kabyle I really needed the book, that the author was a close friend, but I couldn't pay. I only had my keys and needed him to keep the book until I returned later that day or the next day. His answer, take the book. I know you will return, and if you don't return, I offer you the book. He said he had more Algerian books. I asked him about Le Journal, the diary by Mouloud Feraoun. I said I had an ugly recent edition, difficult to read, and that I would be happy to find a better one. While I was walking back to the cité, I opened the book at a page where was written, L'homme, s'il perd espoir, se noie, plus profond que la solitude. If he loses hope, the man drowns, even deeper than solitude. The next day, I visited Rashid, who had another copy of Les Récifs du Silence. I paid the first one and said I wanted to buy the second, that I would offer it to the author's daughter. He didn't want me to pay the second one. He also had for me the original edition of Le Journal, as well as the original edition of Nejma, published in 1956. The copy I brought with me when I traveled last August from Algiers to New Haven. Rashid, an Algerian sailor who fell in love with books at Festival des Étonnants Voyageurs in Saint-Malo, Brittany, and who decided to leave the seas to pursue the dream of becoming a bouquinist by the sea, almost across Quai aux Fleurs. Rashid, because there is a Rashid in the novel. He once pretended to be a sailor to board a boat. He was also the last one to see Nejma before she vanished in the ruins of the ancestors' mountain. In a movement of perpetual despair, he told the writer-journalist who came to report about the murder how all of this is a curse, again the honor of the tribe, or the dislocation of the tribe. In 1954, when started the Liberation War, Malek Haddad, who had just interrupted his studies, joined Katib Yassin in the Camargue, where they found a job as farm workers. They knew each other and were differently related to the city of Constantine, which will serve as a strong metaphor in their books. They are from the same generation, Haddad 2 years older than Kateb. They were both impacted by the massacres of May 45, and we can easily read Haddad's novel as a continued branch of Najma. We can go further and read Rashid Mimouni's novels as another continuous branch of Najma. The Curse, The Honor of the Tribe, The Displaced River. The narrative dynamic moves as a continuum between these authors from different generations, sometimes from different geographies, as if they belong to a common language above the language, a structure of cycles and spheres, a cosmogony of dialogues they silently created and passed on from generation to generation. Now, why is Nejma our origin of the world? The wonder from which Walda flourishes and where she vanishes again, the wound, but also the seismic fall that has also to be taken as a place of desire and displaced roots. The archetype of a desired woman, a desired, dreamed country that are impossible to catch, always moving somewhere else. Not that we didn't have novels and tales before, not that Haddad, Mimoni, and many others were less important or just repeating, continuing Kateb's work. We have to imagine Najma as a furtive center for the star, for the four pillars, for the four winds. A place where Kateb managed to reassemble all the stories and their layers, past and to come, where he drew the attraction and the repulsion between two worlds about to tear up, to dismantle, to divide, a divide that would go much further. The gorges of the Rimmel being an image and its waters moving in invisible routes back to the sea. Najma means star in Arabic. She is married to Kamal. Now you have to be concentrated because I don't tell you about all the connections, but Rashid, Lakhdar, Murad, and Mustafa are four young men. Two of them, Mustafa and Lakhdar, are friends and went to school together nearby city. They were at the protest of May 845, after which they have been arrested, one or the two of them tortured, then released and expelled from school. They will remain with the consequences of the massacres in their villages and among their families. Two of them, Murad and Lakhdar, will discover they are brothers and Najma's cousins. The fourth one, Rashid, the one who tried to be a sailor, will become a friend of Si Mukhtar, an old man who has a lot to say about the past, the dynamic of families and their affiliations. Si Mukhtar, a Don Juan, who had many lovers among the aristocratic families of the city, could be Najma's father, but also Kamal's father. He wants to dissolve the incestuous union. Si Mukhtar has maybe killed Rashid's father, with whom he kidnapped the French woman, Najma's mother. They took her to a cave nearby Constantine, where Rashid's father was found dead. Si Mukhtar and Rashid belong to the same tribe, the Qablut. Najma also belonged to the tribe. They will kidnap her and bring her back to the place of origin, or is it the place of origin that was calling for her to stop the cycle of the fratricide? The four young men are attracted to Najma, of course. But none of them will really get to her, neither her incestuous husband. In a parallel dynamic, the four men from the previous generation, the fathers, were attracted to the French woman, Najma's mother. And it goes on and on, past and future. When the French defeated the tribe of Qablut, it has been dismantled, their men leaders killed, the rest of the tribe divided in four directions. If you are lost, that was intended. You can only be lost. And we have to keep turning and returning and accepting to enter the cycle of the endless vertigo, always remembering the edge of the ravine is nearby. Here is Constantine. The four young men who ended up in Annaba took a route that has its own genealogy of displacement. They found a job and tried to keep quiet, but one of them ends up killing the new husband of Suzy in a surrealistic scene. Murad trying to save a servant from the man who wouldn't stop beating her in the chaos of a wedding that turned into a razzia, a raid perpetrated by the European guests. Murad will be arrested, but the other three will tear up again in three directions. One is missing. The balance is disrupted. Nothing can go well after that. And Rashid, to tell the journalist writer, it was never about Suzy, it has always been about Najma. 9 times 12 fragments, 6 chapters, 3 of them containing 2 times 12 fragments, 12 hours, sleepless nights, a full cycle of 9, a pregnancy that contains the past and the future, repetition of the pregnancy as possible salvation, but also as a possible arrogance. This novel works in an entanglement of times and monologues. Truths and hallucinations collide, as the voice speaking is always under influence. Fever, hashish, folly. To discover the succession of events, we can only imagine whose speaking must have lost contact with reality, or maybe touched another kind of reality. We could read Najma in its first layer, remembering Caleb's metaphor of the French As a language, we need to rape to be able to possess it. When Haddad couldn't, and others today still think the language is a wound to erase. Nowadays, we would use the word maltraiter, mistreat, bousculer, hostile the language to be able to create a new language that speaks for us. Here, Kandeb forces a hybridization of cultures and tales. He will literally give birth to the modern Algerian novel, to a method in constant revelation. We could read the rape of the French woman and the successive murders as a revenge from the humiliated and the dispossessed. But if we read it more carefully, there is no evidence for a rape. We can only sense a growing tension in desire and coexistence. Colonization, often described as a rape, it lives in bodies and memories. We can sense the desire to return the rape, both in reconnecting to a past heritage and in sculpting the new ingredients in presence. We have to go back to the past and understand why and how the nature of violence has changed. We will skip the mentions to Jugurtha, to Numidia, and to the Andalusian heritage in the novel. Let's start with the cycle that sees the destruction of the tribe. Let's just remember, where did the tribe of Qablut came from? The tribe isn't local. The ancestor traveled and came far, and came from the four winds, settled in a mountain he loved and created a line. Which means that from the beginning, the identity of the tribe is the encounter between layers of memories and roots with layers of attachment to the land. Generations struggle between attraction and repulsion, but Nejma becomes the center of both the question and the answer. Only Nejma returns to the mountain, while the fault, the divide, continues its journey. Here, the time is very elastic. We don't really get the sense of days, months, and years. It goes back and forth. Every reader can decide where to catch their center of attention, but the whole magma narrative material definitely invites you to imagine where to take the multiple suspended stories. That's why you can imagine some of the stories that will follow in future Algerian novels as a subtle dialogue with Nejma. Sometime before the murder, Morad meets Suzy in a field. A voluptuous scene of desire is described. The two seem to dance together in the same bubble. But Suzy ends up showing her contempt. His thoughts at this moment could be meditated even for our times. Comme si je lui faisais violence, rien qu'en me promenant au même endroit qu'elle. Comme si nous ne devions jamais nous trouver dans le même monde, autrement que par la bagarre et le viol. As if I was doing her violence just by walking in the same place as her. As if we were never meant to be in the same world except through fighting and rape. It has never been about Suzy and her disdain, but in the way the colonial system, after having fragmented societies, kept creating divided groups and spaces facing each other. If we follow the lines of divide, colonization still continues to appear as the turning point that has created long-lasting binary conflicts and polarized societies, both in the ex-colonies and everywhere where the same question remains. Are we meant to coexist in the same world? And how are we meant to coexist? Where does the lines of violence and divide stop? Where should we dig to find exact lines of nowadays fractures? In the dry river? In the flooded and charged waters? Le monde colonisé est un monde coupé en deux, says Frantz Fanon. The colonized world is a world cut in two. He examined and explained this divide with its successive sequences of violence. We could follow the lines of divide growing in different directions, the same way our four characters, just as their ancestors, will tear up in four directions. One of them could be the line of exile, before and after the independence. In his book Exile and Helplessness, published in Paris in 1976, the writer and psychoanalyst Nabil Fares described l'homme coupé en deux, the divided man cut into, shattered, as kneeling in the dark mud of his identity. This movement of tension between exile and homeland has been well described by Mohammed ibn exiled himself from 1959 after having been expelled by the French authorities. His characters move from their shame of failure to the impossible return, longing for home for those outside, endless waiting time for those who remained in the ruins. He describes layers of growing separations and misunderstandings. In his 1998 novel, Si Diable veut, If the Devil Wants, two old men see their young nephew who grew up in the suburbs of Paris return to a village and a society he doesn't understand why. In Simorgue, a novel from 2003, following a mythological bird, an old man crosses the desert, washing up from the weight of tragedy and exile to be able to find rest in his ancestors' land. Cave, desert, birds, old man, mythologies woven with the blanks and silences neither archive or history could yet reveal. Now, I want to envision the four characters as four living pillars, and the star as the center, the origin, the heart of the house. If we understand that our pillars had to make the opposite journey of the ancestor who settled and created the line, if they had to tear up from the center from generation to generation, the reasons being multiple, we have to also imagine these pillars as a succession of four pillars, adding up from cycle to cycle, creating a constellation itself connected to other constellations and satellites. And because a home still needs stability while remaining open to the idea of living pillars, identity, history, vision, we still need to examine the lines of divide and where they have migrated, where the dissociation has moved in our societies, recreating other forms of the dislocation of the tribe. I don't want to imagine the return as the only possibility of restoring the tribe. While the symbolic movement of the four winds returning is still important, I believe in a new way of making pillars return and consolidate the center. The opposite journey serving as the healing of the wound. The regeneration of new augmented pillars as a reconciliation with our constellation of pillars and their satellites, creating new routes and borders of revitalized and expressive rivers. But first, looking at the lines of divide inside and outside. It is said that after a major earthquake, the roots of water move. Wherever we place the major earthquake, we can tell we had quite few aftershocks. Every time, our divide lines had a new face while sometimes looking the same. In my way, I wanted to dig into the waters, to return to the origin in the mountains, and from there, follow the signs, back and forth, seas, roots, mountains. I wanted to return to Najma with new eyes and see if I could find new ways, new answers to what I envision as the divides and the fragmentations of my times. I live in the city of Algiers. Today, I won't tell you about Anna Grecki's poem starting with J'habite une ville aussi candide qu'on l'appelle Alger la Blanche. We still call Algiers the white city for its white buildings and its seagulls, but I wouldn't say she is candid. With her crumbling buildings, from the Kasbah to her hills, flirting with the sea, Algiers is a survivor. A resistant who remembers and will make you feel its layers of memory, its charms and twists. From my window, the line goes to the basement where the poet Jean Sénac has been killed in 1973. I could tell you about 4 other young men, poets, who took trains and came from the 4 directions to meet Sénac. 4 young men arrested after his assassination, some leaving the country, one telling me about torture decades ago, decades after that. But I want to tell you about today's hopes and despair, about today's aftershocks. February 22, 2019, when the streets of the city and the country woke up to the most important protests in the country since the independence, we realized to which extent the layers of memory were still vivid, including among the new generations. Images and slogans referring to the heroes of the Liberation War, but also to the other historical periods after the independence. Spring 1980, the events of 88, the first elections, the victims of terrorism in the 90s, layers of crowds among buildings that have seen other crowds, protests, and murders. Our then president had to resign. The movement slowly dislocated. Divides appeared. COVID ended up the sequence. We moved from the idea of breaking the wall of fear to the idea of impossible change, of the same old ways returning with new faces. During those months, streets were filled with projects and dynamics. Exiled people, old and new generations, returned with the idea that the country was finally waking up after a long trauma, that life would be possible again. But the country has never really done the work of mourning to be able to wake up from its successive traumas. We had other illusions followed by other disillusions. We always stood up, just like the city, proud and resistant, looking at the future. We had enough humiliations and didn't want to be seen in a costume of violence anymore. So we smiled. We had a smiling revolution, but the city answered, as in Malek's Haddad poem, we didn't learn the lesson. Nous n'avons pas appris la leçon. It wasn't enough to smile and to claim. I don't see the 2019 Iraq as a failure. I see it as a deep sign of a vivid society we thought has resigned, a sign of a desired life, an invitation to be aware of how resilient and strong we are and can be as a collective. These images, the return of the pillars, even if other misunderstandings teared them away again, is another cycle where Nejma rejuvenates, asking us to look at the seismic fault more carefully, to examine it in a new way. Events has accelerated since then, locally and globally. In a country where the population is very young, the acceleration is even more important, as is the desire to move on, to turn the page and enter a new sequence. In reaction to these events, polarizations elsewhere have resulted in the accumulation of other polarizations inside: language, buildings, behaviors. Are symptoms and tools we may end up erasing as we would desert a trail in the field, forgetting that it used to take us somewhere. By saying that, I am pointing to the binarities and divides we allowed in our societies exactly because we were afraid of division, still afraid of intrusion and betrayal 6 decades after the independence. And what if our postcolonial work was to mourn, to understand the divides, to consciously rebuild our extremely diverse and multi-layered societies and let them thrive? And because I feel these years as a major shift that could lead generations to tear up again, exactly as we have been separated in the 90s, I believe we need a new Nejma to crystallize, bringing together past cycles and cycles to come, a new moving center with its vivid pillars, same ones, other ones. I went back to Nejma, to Kateb Yassin, to Mohammed Deeb, and to Assia Jabbar. The characters they created in their novels have not only given a voice to a nation in building, but have also shaped, examined, and translated a society in a constant transition, in a constant shaking. But also a literature, a cinema, a theater, and art that can be related to them in many ways. Kateb Yassin died in 1989. He didn't see the tragedy of the 90s, but his funeral already showed the fight between the progressive part and the society and its conservative part. Just by saying that, we can see the repetition of the trap. When I read Deep Zenterbar's late works, I can see how they responded to the urgency of witnessing and questioning the moment. Where did we come from? What did we do? What did we try to build? They answered these questions again and again. I returned to the origin and its constellations to examine the roots and to follow the threads, but also to take the hands of my elders, to feel their presence, their support, to tell them how the moment is defining again, to which extent we could throw the baby out with the bathwater. Their presence was required. And while thinking of how I will myself shape new narratives and characters, I wanted to imagine them all together around a table, just like us. In a large family reunion, writers and characters from all generations, reflecting on the directions we should take, or just being together in the agora of the four winds. Now, I may invite you to the post office. La Grande Poste has been closed for many years now, but you can still enter. You will enter. This place is the real center. Any distance you see on public signs is calculated from there. You could hear some people speaking. They are them and others. They may only say ordinary things or things meant for others to understand. Let's just see it as a way, as an invitation to dig deep, to display the layers and put them in dialogue. Anyone could take it from there and start a new cycle. In the end, another cave will appear. Let's say the cave in Assia Djibar's movie La Nouvelle des Femmes du Mont Chenois. No one will be kidnapped. We will have to follow all the Nejmas, generation after generation, passing the words from ear to ear. We may someday be able to listen to these women and learn from them how to heal from the burning. Then we will know what to restore. We will keep building center and peripheries in conscious becoming. Thank you. That was my mother and my grandmother. I won't tell you all the details about all the other pictures, but I wanted to share with you pictures I took in my country so you had a sense of the people and the geography. And now I will show you something very special, thanks to my friend Yves Sassman, who's with us today, an artist, filmmaker. So she took this, just give me a second, I'm very bad with technology. She took these pictures in Algiers in 2012. And then I thought it would be a good idea to put these dialogues and show you these images. They are very special. She can tell you more about it. And I'm not going to tell you about the technique, but here it is. Have you seen the bird?
Where would I see a bird? It's all closed here.
Not all the steps were lost, you know.
Not even a window.
Stop complaining.
Where is the bird then?
Can't you hear them outside?
I can only hear inside. It's all crowded here.
She didn't send the letter.
Or the letter was rejected.
That's why we got the bird.
The bird had an accident with the window.
But the bird came.
What can we expect from a bird with cranial trauma?
They know where they came from.
Nobody cares.
Don't even mention the future.
All the circles end up here.
All the circles start wherever you make them start.
The letter was rejected.
That's why the bird came.
Don't you hear them?
When a bird comes, it brings a sign.
They are all over.
They saw the bird.
Where is it all going to end?
Have you seen the bird?
I sent another letter.
Did she leave an address?
We are stuck here.
She hasn't really gone.
I haven't heard at the funeral.
Why do you only think of funerals?
Open the window.
It has been rejected again.
Tell me about the sign.
No one can tell you about the sign.
Can't you just say something?
Nobody can hear it for you.
It's all over the city.
They visited from far.
I only remember the white hat.
She was all over it.
Some people can't leave the desert.
It's not really the desert that burns.
Nobody really listens.
I told them about the bird.
They kept playing in circles.
Not every step is visible.
She has been rejected again.
We met by the post office.
Nobody saw the hat.
It was very sudden.
Why is it that loud today?
It's not how it used to be.
Who knows where all this will end up?
Don't even tell me about the well.
Bodies can't always be the same.
I sent another letter.
The house has moved.
It's all about waves. Can you feel them?
The bird has gone.
It has nothing to say anymore.
Not all bodies can be seen.
Not all bodies can fit here.
Open the window.
Maybe you can rest.
Thank you, Samira, for this literary event. You know, for the prose, for I would take the liberty to call drama, and for the poetry that will come after the Q&A. Thank you so much. That was really filled with, cosmopolitan intelligence really was what come to mind as I listened, to you speak, but also modeling a way of rethinking intellectual histories, literary histories, without having to kill or murder our literary ancestors. Thank you so much for all that. We have time for a few questions before the reading that will end our gathering tonight. Who wants to get us started? We have microphones on. There's one hand there.
And while you are giving the mic to someone, I would like to thank my friend Simon Lee, who's also an artist, for reading with me. And earlier, I wanted also to thank everybody at the Whitney Humanities Center personally, you, Cajetan, but also Diane, Sandra, Amy. I don't know if Megan is here. So thank you. It's been wonderful living with you, having you as neighbors.
I'm not an anthropologist or sociologist, but I'm Algerian. I want to thank you for honoring the Algerian history and the Algerian literature, and I saw the Kabyle Panjol,
Oh.
beautiful. So I'm just speaking about the Algerian traumas and the history from the period of independence trauma to the 19 period, which is the Black Century, as we
The Black
say.
Decade, yeah.
And the 132 years of French colonization. What do you think between Algerian resiliency and traumas and identity, like from the French colonization? How can we make, as you said, this
Like,
a cut
you
off?
mean how can we move from that?
Can you see this move, and how can you describe the Algerian resiliency toward those traumas? Do you think it was resilient, a big, strong resiliency, or it could be more or something like that? Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. I wanted that talk to be as inclusive as possible. I know not everybody knows about Algeria, its history, so that's why I tried to give some landmarks, but also I didn't want it to be too much. We need to know things and learn about them, but we also need to breathe all together. About how I see the future, how we can turn the page. For me, there are two times, and we usually forget about it. Like even the Algerians inside, we are all over it. We absorbed a lot, and sometimes we just want to keep silent because we have to move on, but the memory is there. And I remember an encounter that has a bit changed my life, not a bit, a lot. That was for the 2002, which has been the 40th years of independence of Algeria. I was in a bookshop in Didouche Mourad. The bookshop doesn't exist anymore, Librairie El Ghazali. And there was Malika Rahal. For those who don't know her, sorry, she's a historian. And at that time, she was just starting to work on her PhD. And we met. She knew I was a friend of an important poet who was tortured. His name is Jamal Amrani, and she wanted to get to him. The same day, like the same moment we were there and she was asking me these questions, arrived someone who was important in our history, Eliette Lou, who was part of the Porteuse de Valise, I don't want to say the Europeans, but the Algerians from European origins who activated for the independence of the country. And she was there listening to us. We were complaining about the situation because we thought, yeah, we can be proud of what we did, but still, it's a misery, it's a tragedy. We have to go further and build our countries. And like, we are fed up with these governments and whatever. And she looked at me and she said, I'm so proud of you, the young generation, that you have this energy, you are criticizing, and this is what we have fought for. But while doing that, keep doing that. But while doing that, never forget that this country is a giant with feet of clay. Que ce pays est un géant au pays d'argile, which means that's true, we did a lot, but we are still fragile because we have been through a lot. So now I always remember this. And the day I decided that there is the time, our times as human beings and with our biology, that is, I don't know how long we will be living, but there is the biological time and the history time. And it's moving, but not as fast as we want to. So the day I accepted that I won't see the Algeria I dream of while I am alive, but I will do everything I can to do the work, to do my part of the work. And maybe I will be surprised. So we have to remember these two times. And we have a lot of work to do, but I mean, you referred, I think, to the French-Algerian crisis nowadays. We have the feeling that it's returning as if it was 60 years ago. I don't think it's returning the same way. I think that inside, we have to understand that the work we have to do is different. And because we don't have enough spaces of dialogue inside the country, most of what we hear of comes from outside, especially from France, or from the Algerians living somewhere else. But we have to be more active. It's not that easy, but the people who are inside, it doesn't mean I put them in opposition. They have to all do the work they can do. But we need those who are inside to find ways to do more and to think from the center. And to have a country where others will return, because others keep returning with questions. And if we want to answer the questions, we have to do more work inside.
Yeah, thank you. We would take maybe 2 or 3 questions, but we'll take them together. Please be concise so that we can get through a few more before we go. So here, I'll start with you, then I'll come to Bayan here. Okay, all right. It is, yeah. So okay,
Is it on? Oh, thank you so much. That was the most fantastic description of Nejma I've ever heard. Wonderful. I was really moved by the centrality you give to literature and to the writers who came before us, and your idea of assembling them all. I started rethinking that in terms of other literatures. And I just wanted to ask you about one sentence that struck me. You said, we need a new Nejma to crystallize. Could you say a little more about your vision of this new Nejma that we need?
That's a secret. Oh, okay.
Are you taking?
So I have.
Yeah, let's take a few of them and we can answer them together. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Samira. That was just sublime. You just mentioned in answering the first question, sort of thinking about notions of biological time, chronological or historical time, sort of the time of historicity. And I'm wondering if you can think a little bit, because it was sort of threaded throughout your talk, about the time of the unconscious, the time of trauma, recursive time, the time that always returns you to always in the same place, but then a time that might also supersede and exceed that, which might be sort of metaphysical time or the time of another place, a place which is an other, which can be understood as the unconscious or as something else.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bayan?
Yeah, I can just speak. Thank you so much for your talk. Thank you so much for your talk, Samira. It was really beautiful for your reading. I just had a question, kind of building off of Omnia's. Kind of what in your mind is the relationship between memory and the present? A lot of your description of Algeria feels like the sort of disposition of Paul Klee's Angelus Novus, in terms of always constantly being fixated with the past and trying to restore for a better future. But then what does that ever mean of like our experience of the present, if we're always sort of living in the haunting or the specter of memory and trying to reconcile with it? Like, are we ever really experiencing these cities in the present? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. About the Najma that will crystallize, it was a way to say that the moment for me now, historically, is so defining, and we can see it everywhere, not only in Algeria, but for us. I think after the COVID, after the Iraq has stopped, and Ali, you know the situation in the country. For me, something has to change in the sense we have to write new forms. It doesn't mean, again, that what is written now is not important or whatever, but we need a rupture somewhere. I don't know if I will be the person who's going to write the next Najma, but I believe now is a time where a rupture is absolutely necessary in the aesthetic and in the forms of writing. And about Omni, as your question, there is a part I didn't have time to develop. It was about ritual. And the Viviana pack I briefly told you about. And that was the reference in the end when I said the women who know how to heal the burning. It was referring to the ritual of the music Gnawa. And I once worked with a composer musicologist called Kamel Zekri, who's the descent of the Diwan Biskra. Biskra is in the south of the country, and usually the musicians, the people who make this music are Black people. And also they are related to a part in the genealogy that not only is mastering this music, but also is at the crossroads of many cultures and languages. So they have a language called Ajmi, where you can find Arabic, Berber, and other different African local languages from Nigeria, from Ghana, from other places. And because their man was, how do you say forgeron in English?
Blacksmiths?
Yeah, thank you. Because when they would work, they could burn themselves. So their wives or the women of the families had to learn how to heal. And then this friend explained something very interesting. He said, now we still get the music, and it became kind of folkloric, and they travel, they give concerts everywhere. But the real ritual works with the two, with the archetype of the male energy and the archetype of the female energy. This is not about gender, it's really archetypes of energies and the transmission of the information. So the music is still there, and you have the master, usually the one who plays the gumbri, is the one who will bring the spirit. But it's the woman who will be dancing, because the woman will receive the information. So what does it mean for me, if I translate it like in nowadays life? In nowadays life, for me, there is the trauma has created patterns in our societies. We can simplify it in saying it's only the masculine energy pattern that is still continuing, even if we still say that women were leading because fathers died and women had to take care of families. Mohammed Deeb keeps saying that we didn't have the father, we need the father. But when you see our politics, it's all about fathers. Our president now is the uncle, the great uncle. So there is somewhere something related to that, not to men and women, but to archetypes of societies and how they have responded to the trauma and how there is still a balance to be found inside families, but also inside the big family of the society, how we rebuild and what are the things that will help us to take a step forward and move from silences. Because the archetype of silence, usually it's the pride. So now maybe I can continue with your question, the memory of the present. I remember 15 years ago, I organized poetry festivals in my country. And some of my friends who are poets told me, but only a few years after that, they said, you know, Samira, we have a very strong memory of our visit to Algiers because you would show us all this beautiful city and whatever, but in every corner you would tell us, this one has been killed here and this one has been killed here. And from this building to this building, they put a cord and a body was just moving from a building to a building. We can see this in the journal from Mouloud Ferraou, that really buildings have memory. One of the images here, if I see it, I will show it to you. It's the Cité Pouillon. In Cité Pouillon, in le journal de Mouloud Ferraou, he would describe you how the bodies in the street, especially during the period 58, 59, and then when started the OAS. And this, it's not here, it's later. This specific place, it's strange, but not strange in the same time. It is one of the centers of the protest in the city, in the city of Algiers. Like every 20 years, there is a protest there, very violent protest. And exactly in the same places where he described bodies, we would see things burning. And so how to keep, like how to move from this memory? I mean, for me, I did it with layers. It was really layers of, first I didn't know because I belonged to that generation that was separated from the generation of the 90s. That was what I was referring to. The generation of Youssef Sebti, Tahar Jaoud, who has been killed in the early 90s. We have been separated because they have been assassinated. But others have left the country. And I met many of them after that. In 2022, for example, when we celebrated, I keep returning to the celebrations of the independence of Algeria. That was the 60s. I was invited to Orléans by a literary organization in Orléans. You know, it's a city, the city of Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc. They have a Jeanne d'Arc in the main square of the city. And so I was invited by a cultural organization, but also by the national, the library, the main library of the city. And two faces stayed really deep here in my heart. One day I gave a conference on Algerian literature. I had three or 400 people in that theater. In the end, a woman came to talk to me. She forgot her wallet, like at the bookshop where I was signing books. She forgot it, and then she returned 5 minutes later. Nobody was there, so she said, "Oh, it's good that I forgot that because I had something to tell you I couldn't tell you before." And she was like, "You know, I haven't heard about them since 30 years. Like, I wanted to forget about this. It's so painful. They had to leave the country in the early 90s. And I didn't think about them anymore. And you gave me back an Algeria I have lost forever. And she said, now I will go home and I will read them again. The day after that, I swear to you, the day after that, I gave a talk in the Le Frac, like the gallery, the gallery of the city, the Museum of Art of the city of Orléans. And in the end, a young woman came, asking me for a signature around 2022. She started telling me, you know, they don't tell us anything. They don't say anything about it. And I was, tell me more. And she couldn't tell more. She just cried and ended up hugging me and crying and crying and crying. And she could be the daughter of the other one. And this thing, I had it again and again. Like I was a few months ago in Nantes, invited by a professor of history, and the young people were saying the same, like they have a parent who's Algerian, a parent who's not. And there is this, they want their children to move on, but it's not possible because it's this generation that's coming to the country and wants to understand. And it's this generation also who goes through misunderstanding. For example, with the language. I had a young artist coming to visit me at home in Algiers, 30 years old, starting her chapbook with, I don't write in the language of the colonizer. Like she was writing in English, but she was raised in France. She went to the Beaux-Arts in France. Every exhibition she did was paid by, which is normal, she's French. And then I didn't want to hurt her, but I was still like, are you like judging me? You're in my country. You are not from here. I mean, you have Algerian citizenship. You're welcome. The country, for me, I would open all the borders to everybody. And at some point, I just asked her 3 questions. I said, when was your mother born? She said 1962. And I said, oh, that's the year Algeria has independence. And I said, where did she go to school? She said, Algeria. Where did she go to university? Algeria. And then what did she do? She said she was a professor in the university. And in which language did she teach? She taught in French. And I said, excuse me, this is the same thing that happened to me. I studied medicine. I studied in French in my country. I was born in 1980. So could you just ask yourself that your mother maybe was French-speaking, but educated by an independent country who decided to educate its people in this country? I mean, it takes time, but if we go into confrontation and we just feel burned and rejected, and this happens, like you need time to get used to it and not just shout on people and say, oh, fuck you, you don't understand. So it's layers. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. Some people will hate you because you didn't behave the way you had to behave. But some other day you will behave a bit better.
Okay, we'll turn to the final part with the poetry. Thank you.
Thank you. So I translated this for Omnia's class when she invited me. But I wanted to share with you a reading. It's short. It's part of a piece I wrote that's called Tremblement. I translated that. Thank you to Alice who helped me decide for one specific word, the just. And this is in French. It's a bit painful, but we need it as a catharsis. We are going through the same things in this world. Qui a tué un homme, une femme, a tué toutes les femmes, tous les hommes, tous ensemble, a tué ensemble toutes et tous. Qui a tué tue encore. Qui a tué un enfant a tué ses enfants et tous les enfants à naître, et tous les autres enfants. Sorry, I will repeat this one. Qui a tué un enfant a tué ses enfants et tous les autres enfants, a tué tous les enfants à naître. Des êtres se déversent sur les routes, il pleut sur nous des bombes, et pendant qu'elles pleuvent, des bombes tombent sur d'autres gens ailleurs, et d'autres choses que des bombes et d'autres choses ailleurs tombent. Il pleut sur toi quelque chose que tu ne comprends pas. Il pleut sur nous des Algériens noyés et d'autres noyés qu'on ne comprend pas. Il pleut sur les villes des images de villes déchiquetées, des artefacts d'une autre guerre. Les villes sont ébranlées. Elles sortent de leur axe, les villes, elles migrent. Les villes débordent de leur centre. Elles se noient, les villes. Elles retournent à la mer. Où es-tu à m'enfouir? Ici, ici, ici. Les villes sont chargées de mémoire, de tout ce qui a plu sur les villes, de tout ce qui est entré dans les villes, de tout ce qui a foncé dans la ville, de tout ce qui a quitté la ville, de tout ce qui est tombé sur la ville. Nous sommes chargés. Nos yeux sont chargés et nos autres yeux sont chargés, et ceux qui ne voient pas et ceux qui n'entendent pas et ceux qui ne comprennent pas aussi sont chargés, chargés du vide qui n'est pas vide. Les villes sont chargées des lignes qu'on dessine, des lignes qu'on explose, des lignes qu'on efface, des lignes qu'on replace. Les mémoires à tous les coins de la ville se vide. Les mémoires parlent à la mer, parlent au sel de la mer, les mémoires sont chargées. Les villes respirent. Les villes vides respirent quand elles sont vides. Elles vont à la mer, elles parlent les villes à la mer. Les villes vides parlent. Elles régurgitent les villes, elles se lavent. Elles se lavent, elles se lavent. Des sourires flottent sur la ville et sur la mer. Ils flottent des sourires qui vont et qui viennent. Des sourires flottent sur la rive, ils vivent dans la ville qui scintille. Et l'eau, et le sel, et les étoiles scintillent. La ville vide vit. Des sourires tremblent, et des justes. Les sourires des justes tremblent, il y a des justes qui tremblent, qui ne savent pas comment être justes. Des justes qui tremblent pendant qu'ils sont justes. Ils franchissent les lignes de fer, les justes et les lignes de démarcation, et ils tremblent. Ils passent de l'autre côté, les justes, et ils tremblent. Ils tremblent des hommes sur la terre, et des hommes pour les femmes, et des femmes pour les hommes, et des êtres pour les êtres. Ils tremblent des êtres, et les enfants ne tremblent plus. Ta vie vaut ma vie, vaut ta vie, vaut les milliers d'autres vies, d'un bout à l'autre la vie. Le peuple veut. Mais que veut le peuple? Que veulent tous les autres peuples qui vivent, qui se noient, qui se déversent, qui désertent? La mer porte les peuples qui veulent, les peuples qui ne savent pas qu'ils veulent. Il bat le cœur des peuples bas quand ils ne savent plus, les yeux hagards, il bat les corps figés, les corps ouverts, il bat. Sur le bord des routes ouvertes, il bat, les peuples veulent. Yain, Yain. La source aussi est à garde, mais la source revient. Sur le bord des routes, elle s'ouvre, la source, elle se déverse. Yain, Yain. Ce sont les yeux qui veulent, les yeux des peuples qui veulent, les peuples qui ne savent pas mais qui veulent. Yain, Yain. Défends tes ennemis, dit la source. Défends surtout tes ennemis, ceux que tu considères comme tes ennemis. Défends ceux que tu ne comprends pas. Défends ceux que tu ne crois pas. Défends ceux que tu comprends comme tes ennemis, et alors tu n'auras pas d'ennemis.
Yain. Ya. Aïe. Écoute, dit la source. Tremble. Et alors tu n'auras pas d'ennemi.
Thank you, Samira. Have a good evening, everyone.